Welcome to Agenda. I'm Colin Chapman, and this week I'm talking to Rodger Baker about the jockeying for power in China and the relevance to that of two current events. Rodger, thanks for joining me. And can we first of all talk about that extraordinary story about the head of the People's Bank of China defecting to the United States? It turned out, of course, to be a furphy, but it was very odd, wasn't it?
Well, the story started to emerge through the Chinese press, and we've seen a lot more rumor mongering going on in China, although this one seemed a little bit more unusual than in the past because it put it all the way to the point of the defection, a story that was almost unbelievable from the start. It added in some numbers that seemed pretty remarkable, but it wasn't immediately denied by the Chinese in any strong way. And what we've seen is a pattern in China that when the story is internal, they try to suppress it, but they wait until the story goes external before they really try to disprove it. And that appears to be what has happened in this case. It's not entirely clear why this rumor started up. There's multiple potential explanations for it. But it does seem to reflect some of the struggles going on in China right now over policy, over economic policy, and particularly over jockeying for position and jockeying for position amongst the various protégés of different leaders as we head towards 2012, which is going to be a generational shift in Chinese leadership.
On a more serious note, we have China embarking on a series of naval exercises in the South China Sea, just at the same time as the United States and South Korea are embarking on exercises of their own.
A couple of things on this. One, we've seen that the Chinese, particularly since the Cheonan incident in South Korea, have really tried to assert themselves against U.S. and South Korean exercises in the Yellow Sea. And anytime the U.S. or the South Koreans hold an exercise, the Chinese seem to be willing and ready to hold maybe two in response to show that that's their sea. They really consider that the gateway to their country. So in some ways, there's a political message coming across from this. Even if it was a previously scheduled exercise, they will play up the political ramifications of it. At the same time, we've really seen a sort of strong and nationalistic tone by the Chinese, particularly when it comes to dealing with issues regarding what they have as maritime claims. We've seen it in the South China Sea, we've seen it in the Yellow Sea. And this appears to be stirred not only by basic politics in China and sort of the traditional sense of trying to show that China is the big power in the region, but also by some subtle changes in the way in which the military has been interacting and becoming more assertive in politics.
And is this because the military want a greater say in government when the big changes take place next year?
We've seen the military really try to push its point of view, try to make sure that it has a stronger seat at the table in recent years. We've seen some changes in the way in which the military is budgeted. The military certainly has taken a stronger role in advising the government in foreign policy issues, particularly policy issues that deal with resource supply lines and deal with export routes. And that really seems to have drawn the military in to justify their role. There's really a little bit more to this, though, than just the military being concerned about supply lines. Back when Jiang Zemin was president, one of the things that he did as part of economic reforms and part of restructuring in China was to cut the military's business operations. The military had become in many ways self-funding or self-supporting, at least on a provincial or a local level, where military commanders would be running factories. And in some ways, their focus became heavily on the factories and a lot less on the concept of a broad integrated national defense.
This is fascinating history. Are you really saying that the military was partly funded by commanders running businesses?
The military really had taken advantage of the openings that we had seen put in place even before, back in the late 70s and the early 80s. And because of the connections that obviously the military had in the government, it became well placed to be able to start running businesses. And these were your regular manufacturing businesses, your regular export businesses, even if it was factories for making T-shirts or shipping conglomerates or things of that sort. And the military had, at a certain point, become somewhat dependent upon these. So the local commander would be supplementing his troops' allowances with money that he was making from industry. And the central government had sort of gotten to a point where they weren't looking necessarily at how much funding they were giving to the military, because these local commanders would be able to bring in their own money or bring in their own revenues. But what that did is it started to break down the command and control structure, and there were certainly some serious concerns by the central government that ultimately you were laying the groundwork for the spread of warlordism in China, where you had a military economic grouping that ultimately became more interested in itself and its own interests than in those of the broader state.
It's understandable then perhaps that some of these guys want to get back some of the power that they had before.
Well, what we saw at the time was that when the central government cut them out of business, it kept their loyalty by significantly increasing not only the funding of the military, but really changing the way in which the government focused on military funding. So there was a reduction in the total number of forces. There was a shift away from the traditional human wave tactics and just having a massive infantry to starting to get into better technology, what the Chinese are now calling informationalization of warfare, where they brought in new equipment, new training. They really started to jump up the scale of the types of technologies that they implemented. The Navy expanded, the Air Force expanded, the Missile Command expanded. And in doing so, you've started to create what could be seen as a much more professional Chinese military, a slightly more modern Chinese military. There's now interoperability, there's more training between the different branches of the military, so that they seem to be better positioning themselves to try to compete in modern warfare and in the modern stage. This obviously bought the loyalty back of the military. It firmly reestablished that the military was underneath the party and the military was underneath the state, and it wasn't something operating separate to that. But over time, the military in this role has started to see itself as an element that should have a stronger role in politics as well. And especially over the past maybe 2 years, we've seen generals become much more open in their commentary on political issues, not just on questions of security.
So, can we expect more military people in government?
Well, as we're heading towards the leadership transition, it appears highly likely that the military is going to try to increase its role. In some sense, the military's direct role comes through the Central Military Commission, which is its official position into politics. But there's some talk now that the military is trying to take, say, retired generals and have them put into positions in some of the ministries, put into positions in the bureaucracy, so that you, instead of having acting generals in there, these are retired military officials, but you start to have those connections built in through the civilian part of the government as well.
Roger, thanks for being with Agenda this week. Goodbye.